The following news flash is brought to you by the Lone Star Lowdown, providing your daily bulletins for the commodities market. Today in history, news updates, and the inside scoop into the tides of the alternative. Markets for Wednesday, the 22nd of June, 2016, are currently trading with gold at $1,265.56 an ounce, silver $17.28 an ounce, Texas crude $48.85 a barrel, and Bitcoin dropped to 625 U.S. currency. Today in history, last year, 2015, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley calls for the removal of the Confederate flag from the State House grounds in the wake of the senseless killings in a Charleston historic church. It was this event which led to the nationwide ban on the Confederate Dixie flag. Today in history. In recent news, House Democrats had a sit-down on the floor of the House chamber today. They effectively forced the House into a temporary recess as part of an effort to get Republicans to vote on gun control legislation. Representative John Lewis, Democrat from Georgia, a civil rights leader who led sit-ins all throughout the 1960s, led the effort with sharp criticisms towards Congress for not voting in favor to pass more gun restrictions. Democrats are planning to essentially hijack the House floor both Wednesday and Thursday in an effort to get gun control measures a hearing. A spokeswoman for Representative Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, Ashley Strong, said that, quote, "The House cannot operate without members following the rules of the institution, so the House has recess subject to the call of the chair. As a minority party, Democrats have virtually no power over which bills are voted on. The only thing they can do is protest or use procedural maneuvers, of which they plan to do both this week, so keep your eyes on the House floor." Ultimately, the goal is to force lawmakers to vote on a bipartisan bill that would give the FBI and Attorney General the power to ban people on the controversial no-fly list from purchasing firearms. According to a government report by the Treasury Department released today, the trust fund used to pay hospital insurance costs for Medicare will be emptied out by 2028, about 2 years earlier than calculated, while the Social Security Trust Fund has enough cash to pay full benefits for only another 18 years. The trustees overseeing both stated that reforms are needed in order to avoid cutting health care and retirement benefits for Americans. Acting Commissioner of the Social Security Administration, Carolyn Colvin, said that increasing payroll taxes by slightly more than 1% could improve the solvency of the fund over the next 75 years. Maybe it's time we start looking for and creating options that don't involve Uncle Sam. This is Rick Rohde with your lowdown for June 22nd, 2016.
Friends, good evening and welcome. It is time now for INN World Report Radio here on the Great Logos Radio Network. My name is Tom Kiley. I've got the honor to bring this program to you on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights. And that's what we're going to do right now. It is, we'll be joined, well, I should say, let me roll back a little. We will be joined by our friend Joe Calhoun for some commentary in a little bit, but the phone lines are open. Let's open up the phone lines in this, I guess, what is this? This is our first post-Brexit radio show for INN World Report. Isn't that something? So first post-Brexit show, and the phone lines are now open, 512-646-1984. What do you all think of the vote in England? There's certainly an awful lot to say about it. It is potentially quite earth-shaking, earth-shattering, groundbreaking. It's, I feel, a very, very big deal. This, on its face, ostensibly at least, is a real smack in the face to the globalist agenda of, trying to get rid of nation states, tying Europe up into one sort of federated place on the model of the United States, perhaps on the model of the former Soviet Union. But it's a very, very different situation. The Soviet Union was based on a lot of countries that were part of the Russian Empire. And, of course, the United States was based on some land that was just stolen from Native Americans. Europe is a very, very different kettle of fish. This is a place that has had very different peoples, customs, languages, generally Christian religion, but even that we've had quite a tumultuous history. So this is the idea. The Trilateral Commission. You put these chunks of countries together, and in my opinion, it is when local oligarchs fight each other to the point. This is what all wars are about: oligarchs fighting each other, trying to knock off the other guy and get control of their resources and their people and their land and all that stuff. Once they reach a certain mass, then they want to go beyond countries and want to go into continents and the world, right? So that's what we see going on here. And I think it's a reversal of that, potentially a reversal of that, which, I think has been in a long time coming. But it is with England, a peculiar set of circumstances, a country that had its own empire, So anyway, 512-646-1984 is the number to call. What are your thoughts on Brexit? Certainly there's a lot of gloom and doom, fear and propaganda that's being spread against the will of the British people. But look who is spreading it. The media and the politicians who do the bidding of these very same globalists. So how reliable is all of this gloom and doom? Now, it's not to say that they can't hurt England and punish England for their vote, the people of England. But I'll say one more thing before we go to our first caller, John, who's on the line. And you can be next, 512-646-1984. Already, immediately, as if it was planned, they've got this big movement to vote again. And this, of course, this is how the European Union works. They've done it on several occasions. When the people of a country vote no, then they lean on their politicians that have turned around and have them vote again. And again, these close elections keep squeaking by, and they keep at it until finally they get the answer that they want. Now, there's already this movement afoot in England already. Now, the most cynical observation that I've seen, and it came to me via one of our friends, somebody wrote a piece where George Soros probably made a ton on this because he was probably hedging and betting that the Brits would vote it down, in which case he shorted the market and made a ton. And now that he's made his money, it's probably they're going to lean on the British politicians to go ahead and have this revote, and they'll make sure that it goes the right way the next time, and he'll be right back where he was, except for in the interim, he just made a big, big pile of cash. George Soros hurt the British economy very badly already when he tried to corner the pound and so forth. But that's what I think. What do you think? 512-646-1984. Let's go now to John. Hi, John. How are you?
All right, Tom.
Well, John, my thoughts turned to you when I heard the verdict of the British people, the people in the UK, that they turned out the European Union, but that the people in Scotland and Ireland seem to want to go for it, staying it. What the heck's that all about?
Well, that was not the result that was expected, not by anyone from all I'm hearing. I've been monitoring the media from back home since Friday morning. And even Boris Johnson and the rest of his posse, they weren't expecting to win, so they don't have a plan. That's one. God, I don't know where to go, Tom. I've never known anything like this in my life. It's just bizarre.
Well, first of all, I mean, I think that shame on anybody, because I had a good feeling that the Brits would vote for leaving. But I also fully expect that is the last thing the oligarchs, through their controlled politicians and their controlled media, would want anybody to think. So all this too close to call, looks like it's going to pass, all that stuff, I think was garbage lies.
Yeah.
Just to set the stage that if the British had the nerve to vote for themselves, they would be able to steal it, because it's hard to steal if you're saying, oh, it looks like it's going to be a big vote against staying in the EU. Can't say that and then steal it. So I think, and this is even, don't ask me how, but they got the damn bookies to even go with them on this, didn't they?
I don't know, but I stayed up most of the night, Thursday night, Friday morning, and it was looking like it was going to be a Remain for several hours, and then all of a sudden it changed. It just changed suddenly, and I'm listening to the people at the BBC and LBC Radio saying, wow, this is it's looking like we're going to be leaving. There's a lot of interesting little things tied into this, Tom.
But before you tell us those, and I want you to, let me just add one thing. I looked at it a little bit differently. When you say it looked like it was not going to pass, and it looked like it was not going to pass, and then all of a sudden something changed. That's not the way I look at it. The way I look at it is they wanted me to believe it wasn't going to pass. They wanted me to believe it wasn't going to pass. They tried to get me to think it wasn't going to. While they were counting the votes and figuring how to steal this thing, that's what they put out. They could have been counting the votes and saying, "Holy mackerel, England's going to pull out," but they're not going to tell you that, all right? Because you don't know how you should steal an election until you count all the votes and you know how many votes you got to switch. How's that for an analysis? And then they got to a point. This is what baffles me. They got to a point where they couldn't steal the election. Maybe they changed so many votes that they started to say, this is too much. We can't change this many votes. It's going to be suspicious. Or maybe somebody inside the British government decided enough is enough and we want to get out of this thing. So that's my thoughts. But you were saying there were so many little things that look strange to you.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I was monitoring it through the night, and the different votes were coming in from different constituencies. Now, the votes that were coming in later were obviously the larger constituencies, mostly in the south of England. And funnily enough, they were the constituencies that were expected to vote Remain, and strangely enough, they were the ones that voted Leave. Now, the Scotland thing I find particularly troubling because I was on with Kev Baker's show last Thursday night. We were talking about it, and he had a fellow host on from his network, a guy called Chris Everard, he's a documentary filmmaker as well. And I was listening. Chris does a show on a Sunday afternoon here. It comes on 2:00 my time, and I was listening to him. And he had a guy called Leo Zagami on. Are you familiar with that name?
I'm sure not. No.
No, he's some connection. Some connection with the Masonic Lodge in the Vatican or something. Alex Jones has had him on a couple of times. He met him, in fact, when he was over in Europe there a while back. And I happened to hear him talking about Nicola Sturgeon, the leader of the SNP, is actually an MI5 plant. Well, that just kind of made my hair stand on end because I've been a huge fan of hers since I became familiar with her 2 years ago. Because bear in mind, Tom, I hadn't been paying attention to politics back home until the Scottish independence referendum came up 2 years ago.
Well, let's face it wasn't very interesting until then, right?
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you remember, but we soon discovered after the result of the Scottish independence referendum was announced that vote rigging had taken place. There was photographic evidence of it, and then we heard about the shopping bags full of yes votes being found in public trash cans. And then the one that really shocked a lot of people was the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, a girl called Ruth Davidson. She actually sat on TV one night and talked about how they sampled the postal votes that came in from the Northern Islands, the Shetland Islands and the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland. Well, that's against the law to do that. And she was questioned by the police. And then we never heard anything more. But what was striking, Tom, was the deafening silence from the SNP when all this was found out. They never said a word. So when I hear this on Sunday about Nicola Sturgeon being MI5, I'm wondering to myself, well, could this be real? Now, if it is real, here's how this is going to pan out, theoretically.
Well, hold on. We're gonna have to be hanging on tenterhooks because the music just started. So I don't want you to get cut off. So you're saying, now here's how all this could have panned out, right? Is that about where we're at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I want you to hold that thought. We're speaking with Scottish John. You could be next, 512-646-1984. We're talking about the Brexit vote and the aftermath. We'll be right back.
You are listening to the Logos Radio Network. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
All right, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiley here. INN World Report Radio, 512-646-1984. Phone lines are open, and we're talking about the aftermath of the Brexit vote in England. I think it's earth-shaking, but it ain't over till it's over. I read a very, very good article by a guy named John Ward from England who said, "This is don't take it easy. This is the first battle in a long round of battles. They're going to try to take this back. They're going to try to change it. But let's see. It could be perhaps a turning point, and there's supposed to be other European nations that would like to follow suit. Let's go back with John. Scottish John is our caller. You could be next, 512-646-1984. Hi, John. Are you there?
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
That's a name I've heard a lot these past few days, John Ward. Isn't he a member of the Labour Party?
I don't know. I don't know if it's the same one, but there's a blog called The Slog that one of our great friends sends me, posts and stuff. And on that blog, I poked around and I saw his great article that said, hey, look, guys, this is just round one that we won. They're going to try very hard. The EU is notorious. They'll ignore something like this, and they'll squeeze the politicians to have another vote, and they'll keep doing it until they get the result that they want.
Right. Anyway, you can email that to me?
Sure.
Cool. Right, now, to get back to where I was with this Nicola Sturgeon deal. That's obviously, it disturbed me greatly to hear that, because obviously when it's someone that you like and respect as a politician, which I've certainly done in her case, I obviously don't want that to be true. But as I said, when I think back to the aftermath of the 2014 Scottish independence referendum, it makes me wonder. But here's how this is. Well, I don't know how it's going to pan out, but here's a strange scenario the way it sits at the moment. If Britain are out of the EU, and I heard that Juncker told Cameron that he needs to pack his bags and get going as quickly as possible, means that Scotland then are no longer in the EU. So,
right, and that's what's I find so strange about this, how Scotland is going against the Brits. Now, is it possible that what the Scottish have in mind is that they want to secede from the UK and stay in the EU? Is that what they are thinking?
That's the story that we're being given. Now, but I find this hard to believe, Tom. I cannot for the life of me understand why the Scottish people would want to trade one master in Westminster for another master in Brussels. Now,
exactly. Why would they want to go from one empire to the new empire?
Yeah. I've been corresponding with Kev all weekend, and he hasn't met one person who voted Remain.
Yeah.
And I also spoke to a friend of mine in Edinburgh a couple of days ago, and she's a big Scottish independence fan. And likewise, she says, no, John, don't be fooled. Don't think all us indie supporters are fully behind the SNP, because, we're not that gullible. We know how devious politicians can be. So it's a very, very interesting and very precarious situation we're in at the moment, Tom.
Well, yeah, let's walk backwards a little bit. First of all, it's pretty clear that there's some very, very powerful interests that do not want the British to leave, okay? And yet, and they can control the vote, one would think. And yet, they didn't have their way. So how does that happen? Okay, well, the vote went one of several ways, in truth. I don't know that we know what the true vote was. As you've alluded to, with the Scottish referendum and the way we know voting is done these days, you're really not going to find out the true vote. Yet, we have a situation here where whatever it was shown to be in favor of leaving the EU. So what does that mean? It means to me that maybe there was a massive vote or a much larger vote to leave the EU, but they shaved it down and made it look like it was tighter. Maybe it was actually the way it ended up, very close or fairly close. Or maybe it was, indeterminate. It was so close, or maybe the stay vote won. I can't believe a couple of those, but in some respect, if it was a true vote, or if it was a larger vote, it was allowed to go through. So that's a big question to me. Why is that? I think that, and I spoke with Wayne Madsen on the phone the other day. He said that he feels, he's heard that the Queen is not thrilled with this idea of being on the same level of some, guy in Romania who's running that country, and, it's all these little countries are letting in now, and it makes Britain look like it's just another little country, so, and maybe, and A, B, are there old patriotic empirists in England who want to return to the glory of the old days and they want to get out of this EU? Is that possible? Or are there actual patriots in England who feel that this is not a good deal for the country and they're going to make sure that the vote is allowed to go through straight? What do you think of those?
Oh, absolutely. I've held the view for a long time, Tom, that the Conservative Party, these are the descendants of the landed nobility.
Right, the landed gentry, eh?
They're the landed gentry, then, okay. They think they're their places in the castles being fed all the good food and drinking all the good wine, and our places standing outside the castle walls waiting for the leftovers being thrown through the turrets. You know? That's their mindset.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, they're just a damn bunch of buffoons. They're totally out of touch with reality, and I've heard a lot of people say over the weekend, actually, that this is why the vote went the way it did, because people are finally fed up with these damn Tories and their poshness. You know, they're just... I absolutely loathe Tories, Tom, with every fibre of my being, and I can't...
What do you call them, toffs?
Toffs, yes.
Toffs. So let me ask you something. We're all familiar with the James Bond character, okay? I happen to like the original one that was played by Sean Connery back in the day, a Scotsman, right? But now they got the new one, Daniel Craig, and you had several in between. This guy is obviously an uber patriot. How would James Bond vote in the Brexit vote, do you think? That's a good question, right?
Sean Connery?
No. The actual real character that Ian Fleming, and maybe Ian Fleming himself, okay? How would, if that was a real person, that James Bond that we've all grown up with, and let's say Ian Fleming, how would those two, if he was a real person, how would James Bond's character vote in the Brexit vote?
Honestly, mate, I have no idea.
I would think that he would be an uber patriot who would say, enough of this crap where England is subservient to a bunch of damn bureaucrats in Brussels. We're out. That's what I would think, okay? And I'm saying I bet there's real people on the inside who are still there like that, who are going to make sure this thing, was able to have its day in court. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you? Do you think that there's probably some real British patriots or, people in the security services who really feel like, hey, enough is enough? Is that possible?
No, but here's a little tickler for you. This referendum is actually, it's not legally binding under the British Constitution, and the British Parliament could reject it.
Let them try. Bring it on.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be stupid enough to do that. But
bring it on. What about the Queen? Yeah. What does the Queen think about it?
We're on air, Tom. I can't give you my thoughts on the Queen.
Okay. Well, I think that maybe the Queen really likes this outcome. Maybe she is sick and tired of England being treated like another, what do you call it? Something among equals? First among equals. Maybe she's tired of that.
Mm.
And the lies, Cameron, this is going to bring on World War III. We got to do this. There's going to be, Hitler's going to come back. All this garbage. And then I love this headline. Cameron's great big mistake. What do you mean Cameron's mistake? The will of the British people was expressed. How is that Cameron's mistake? For allowing the will of the British people to be expressed? That tells you all you need to know about the mainstream media. His mistake was to allow the British people to express themselves. That was a mistake? He should have only allowed them to express themselves if the answer was going to be stay? That doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah. But that shows you the mindset. Pretty interesting. And, of course, the guy, he went down in flames, that doughboy or whatever you want to call him, poof. I think it's a poof. Anyway, hold on, Scottish John. We'll be right back. We're going to take a short break.
Apple has spent a boatload to convince Americans to store data online, but the company's co-founder says cloud computing is dangerous. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, back to tell you about the black clouds over iClouds next.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
For a decade, Apple's been selling the public on cloud technology. The idea is for users to store their files online in the cloud for a fee rather than saving them on their local devices. But Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak opposes the whole idea. He warns of digital disaster if people store their contents in the iCloud. To quote him directly, the cloud computing trend is horrendous. He's right for two reasons. First, the minute you store stuff on an iCloud, you sign away ownership of that data to Apple. And second, walls can never be built high enough to keep hackers out of servers, not even those built in the clouds. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
You're listening to the Logos Radio Network at logosradionetwork.com.
good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN War Report Radio. That song is so apropos to what we're talking about tonight and to, things in general. That's why I try to pick bumper music that, there's some kind of connection, at least with the ones that have lyrics, okay? That is European Superstate by the, I think, fantastic group, Killing Joke. They started out as a new wave sort of punkish band in England back in the 80s, and I really took note of them back then. They had some good music, and that's another – and they've kept at it, and they've got a good political bent too. European Superstate, it's all about the EU and complaining about it. So I urge you to take a listen to the whole song if you can. If you got iTunes or something, take a listen. Killing Joke, European Superstate. Great album cover, by the way. That album cover shows what looks like it looks like the cross that Christ was crucified on, a big wooden cross on the top of a hill with the sun going down in the background, and there are cell phone antennas nailed to it. I think that's a powerful statement as well. Scottish John is on the line. Let's go back to Scottish John. You could be next, 512-646-1984. Killing Joke, Scottish John. You know that group?
Oh, yeah. I love that song, man. And as you say, how apropos, eh?
How apropos. And did you ever see the album cover for that with the cross that has the cell phone antennas nailed to the top of it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you turned me on to that, man.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, back to the way that this thing smells. It's really an incredible moment, I think.
Yeah, here's a few other interesting little tidbits I heard over the weekend. I heard the former senior minister being interviewed on Sunday, and he was talking. I couldn't write everything down as fast as he was talking. He made several points as regards Scotland being independent from England and being in the EU. Now, they would have to meet certain criteria, one of which was they would have to have their own central bank. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm listening.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just heard something there.
That wasn't me. I'm turning the mic down sometimes while you're talking, so in case I make a noise. But you go ahead.
It sounds like an incoming call, Tom. That's what it is. But anyway, they'll need to wait. This guy said that Scotland would have to have its own central bank before they could have membership of the EU. So that's an interesting little anomaly. Another thing I heard was because now Southern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, is still in the EU and Northern Ireland isn't, well, that throws up another issue about a border there. So I don't know how all that's going to pan out, but it's just all these little things getting thrown into the mix,
I do know, and part of the gloom and doom that these jerks in the media were spewing incessantly was that, oh no, this is going to force Scotland to pull out of the UK now because they want to stay in the EU, and oh no, this is going to force Northern Ireland to join Ireland so that they can stay in the EU. Did you hear that, Swill?
Oh yeah, that's what I've been listening to all weekend, man.
The garbage, you don't hear anything. You don't hear anything unless it's a little bit here and there in the alternative media saying, God bless the British people. They stood up, they spoke, and they made a courageous decision, right or wrong. It's their decision. It needs to be respected. And, John, there is a Mount Everest, I think, of reasons why I would vote that way myself if I lived there. I saw this, who's that kid that Alex uses from England that does reports? What's his name again? Huh?
Paul Watson.
Yeah, Paul Watson. Now, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff he says, but he did a video that one of our great listeners sent me a link to, and he just bangs it out, reason after reason after reason after reason why the Brits would want to pull out. You know the plight of the British fishermen since they joined the EU?
Yeah.
Why don't you correct me if I'm wrong, but according to him, they've been cut back in their ability to fish by 75% since they joined the EU, because they've established that everybody else can come and share their fishing waters right outside a port even, and all these other countries get to come in now and fish in what used to be British waters, and they're only allowed to take in 25% or so of what they used to catch, and that the EU is paying them to burn their boats. And to add insult to injury, some of the people that are coming in are not full-fledged members of the EU, like the Danes and that sort of thing. So they've got countries that are not even full-fledged members coming, and they have to bow to them, whereas in the past it was British territorial waters. It was for the Brits. Is that insane?
Well, here, Tom, when Spain joined the EU years ago, one of the first things they did was they came fishing in Scottish waters with a different size net that wasn't allowed by law, and they were catching all the baby fish. And the fish stocks in the North Sea off both coasts of Scotland were depleted almost to extinction. That was back in, God, I don't remember when Spain joined the EU, but it was a long time ago. And that was the first damn thing they did. They nearly ruined the fishing industry in the North Sea.
And this was all under the imprimatur of the EU, which is ruling everybody from Belgium, and it's supposed to be a better deal for everybody, right? Talk to the Greeks. Ask them how much of a better deal this thing's turned out. How long does this train wreck have to keep going before people will be truthful about it? No?
Yeah, I'm just actually trying to Google when Spain joined the EU just for curiosity.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm scanning the news while we're talking here. And by the way, I sent you that article. Tell me what you think when you get it. Donald Trump targets globalization and free trade. Trump slams globalization. He made a speech today. Trump slams globalization, promises to upend economic status quo. How do you like that? Poor Trump. Unbelievable. And Hillary Clinton, meanwhile.
Let me lighten the mood just for a moment here, Tom.
Lighten the mood for the rest of my life. It's fine. Go ahead.
Did you know that the European Football Championships were actually going on at the moment?
Yes, and I heard that Iceland beat England.
Yeah, so England managed to leave Europe twice this week.
Yeah, that's what I heard. They were trying to equate England losing to Iceland as part of the Brexit fiasco. Well, that's how sick the media is. They're trying to twist it into making you think that that it actually had something to do with Brexit. The British can't do anything right, you know?
That's a special wee joke for the Scots because we love to see England get beat at football.
Yeah, why is that? Because they used to pound the crap out of the Scottish people, probably, right? Back in the day. What's his name? Longshanks was the king?
Aye, yeah. Oh, and
at Falkirk and Stirling?
Yeah, Falkirk, my hometown.
There you go.
Actually, I told you the very first time I spoke to you, Tom, I told you a story, and I don't know if you remember it, but on the site of the Battle of Falkirk between William Wallace and Longshanks' army,
right,
there was a huge old oak tree, and someone took a big chunk of wood out of this tree and they carved a jewelry box that was presented to George Washington.
Okay.
Which was subsequently stolen from him. But that, yeah, I remember telling you that the very first time I called into your show.
Well, there you have it. And it's been a splinter in the side of the evil empire ever since. How's that? I'm trying to make a wood joke there.
And I've got another one to tell you. Is your guest coming on? All
right. Hold on. Yeah, Joe Calhoun's on the line, too, so I'll have both of you on when we come back from break. Tom Kiley, INN, right back just after this.
Easy.
Aretha Franklin, that's what we got to do. We got to rock steady. I tell you, friends, I've been saying it on this show for, I don't know, months and months since Donald Trump, since Donald Trump's surprising insurgency candidacy. Okay, you realize you got to say that carefully. Surprising insurgency candidacy. Wow. Okay, so I've been saying it, and now I see it being said by the mainstream media in this country that, you know, Donald Trump just happened to be in Scotland when the vote took place. I don't think that was an accident. I think, let's bring Scottish John back in. Hey, John, before you get back to your point, can I make this point and get your opinion?
Yeah.
Listen, I don't think it was an accident that Donald Trump just happened to be in Scotland while this vote took place, because if it failed, he could have just blown it all off and not even said anything. But if it was successful, he could say to everybody, I told you so. It's the same thing we're going through in the States. People want their country back. People want their borders back. People want their immigration policy back. And that's exactly what he did. He's sly like a fox, that guy. And to explain all of this, I don't know what you saw, but here in the American mainstream media, there was a whole rash of this thing, like what happened in England. Well, it's the same thing going on here with Sanders and Trump. The people have had enough. Like that. I've been saying that you've heard me say it is a global insurrection. Started in Iceland, then went to Greece, right? And now everybody's getting involved. Okay, now the British, now the Spain with Podemos, the right wing in France, Marine Le Pen, Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn is part of all of that. Although, he's got to grow a new pair. I think Jeremy Corbyn may have had one of those transgender operations. You know what I mean? Because he seems like he's being very sort of I don't know what you call it, androgynous about this whole thing politically. Anyhow, so what were you going to tell us?
Well, for starters, Spain joined the EU in 1986. Now, okay. I called into Joyce Riley's show on Friday morning, and because she wanted some comments about the Brexit, and I pointed out to her, and this was rather ironic, Tom. Do you know the dates of the vote last week were the anniversary of the Battle of Bannockburn? You just reminded me talking about Braveheart.
No, that I did not know. So that makes it sound even worse for the Scots, huh?
Well, here's and just let me clear up a point for any listeners that don't know this. A lot of people think because of the movie that William Wallace was called Braveheart. It was in fact Robert the Bruce, the guy who succeeded William Wallace. He was Braveheart. But I just thought, wow, how weird that this vote takes place on the anniversary of the Battle of Bannockburn, which 4 years later gave Scotland their independence, which she retained for the next 400 and some years until they signed the Act of Union with England in 1707.
And how did that happen?
Yeah,
what kind of a gun did the British hold to the Scottish head to get that thing signed?
Oh, well, they just kept pounding away at us and, diminishing the population. They just, the history.
Sent a lot of them off to the colonies, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm. And that's how the state of Ulster, Northern Ireland, was born. They deported
that's right.
Scots.
The Scots-Irish, they call them.
The northeast 6 counties of Ireland, yeah.
Yep. And they did such a good job there. They sent a lot of them to the U.S. to get rid of the Indians, too.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
And that's where isn't that where bluegrass music comes from?
Yes, that's, not just bluegrass, but the origins, they say, of country music was the fiddle players who came from Scotland and Ireland. Yeah,
that's right. The bluegrass music, I think the bluegrass music was kind of like the forerunner of country music, but yes, it came from the fiddle players from the Celtic fiddle players, no?
Into the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee and the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia?
Yep.
That's where a lot of them settled, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was it, man. And a couple of 100 years later, we got Hank Williams, baby.
Yeah. He would be in favor of Brexit, I feel, but that's what I feel. What do you say we get Joe Calhoun to join in on the conversation?
Yeah, sure. Well, listen, I won't stay on much longer. I'm sure there was one other damn thing I wanted to say to you, but it slipped my mind. Oh yeah, Joyce Riley had a cat in her studio with her Sunday morning. You'll never guess what its name was.
I will never guess. You're right.
And here's the other just one thing. I had a very important meeting to go to on Friday morning, and I was so wrapped up with the result of the Brexit thing.
You overslept.
So I'm looking for the piece of paper so that to check the time. Well, I was supposed to be there at 8:30, and I'm still here at 9:30. So I'm looking for a phone number. Have a guess. Just bear in mind what I just told you. What were the last 4 digits of the phone number I had to call?
6666.
No, 1314, the year of Bannockburn.
Oh, my goodness. And what was the name of Joyce Riley's cat? I'm still waiting to hear.
Braveheart.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well,
all right, mate. I'll get off and let you bring Joe on, okay?
Yeah, do me a favor. Ask Kev if he can come on the show. I want to get his take on this thing, too, all right?
He did. Hey, next Thursday, because I'm going to be on his show again.
All right.
So do you want us both on?
Why not? And then it'll be an all-Scottish night. And take a look. I just sent you the email for that great article from John Ward. Tell me what you think, all right?
Okay.
All right. Very good. Scottish John. And now we're going to go to our good friend Joe Calhoun up in the Continental Divide, high up in the Rocky Mountains. Hey, Joe, how you doing tonight?
Oh, pretty good. Scotch, Irish, Italian, Joe Calhoun.
There you go. Okay. And I'm just Irish, Italian, Norwegian TK himself. So we're talking about the Brexit vote. We're talking about the unbelievable pressure and propaganda that happened before it and during it. and now the unbelievable pressure and junk and garbage that's coming like after it, What do you think?
Oh, well, I can't believe the media. I can believe the media. Sorry. I can believe the media as far as the idiocy of the news. It was on the day I was watching Russia Today once in a while because now all the news, well, at least the ones I get, are dump Trump. So I go to Russia Today to see what else is happening in the world. And they announced on the day of the vote that there would be no news. There's a news blackout, basically. There's no exit polling. There's no discussion on the news media about the vote on the day of the voting. I suppose that's so the media does not influence the vote. So they said on Russia Today that it would be 10 p.m. British time is when the first votes would be counted, and that's when they could cover the news about the vote. Well, that would be about 4 o'clock Mountain Time, but at 3 o'clock at the closing bell of the Wall Street, MSNBC had the news on that there was a rally on Wall Street because the Brits voted to stay within the EU. And I'm going, wow, that's interesting. They haven't even started counting the vote yet, but it was Wall Street got the news, insider news that. Well, wait a minute. Wall Street bell rings at what? 4 o'clock, 4:30? Yeah. Well, that's in New York. Yeah. But, right, and New York is 6 hours behind, or ahead, I should say. Wait a minute, 6 hours behind England. So 4:30 New York time is 12:30 in the morning in England. They're not voting anymore at 12:30 in the morning, right? So they could begin to talk about exit polls and everything if the polls had already closed in England. Well, let's see. Yeah. I got my it was always 7 hours later. It depends on daylight savings time, but generally speaking, 6 hours is a good number to hang on to for England and Western Europe. 7 hours, and I know at 3 o'clock. But they didn't vote until midnight. I'm sure the polls stopped there at 9 o'clock at night, the latest. So they already had plenty of time to do some, exit poll reporting or even preliminary before it was
results.
The close of Wall Street, because it was at 3 o'clock my time, which is 7 hours behind London. Well, you're not in Central. You're in Mountain. You should be 8 hours behind London. Yes. And 8 hours behind London. 7 hours behind London. Right. So 3 o'clock your time is, like I said, it's like 12:30 in the morning in England. So I'm sure the polls had been long closed when you heard these reports. No, because at 3 o'clock here it would be 10 p.m. in London. Well, you said it was the closing bell at Wall Street. Wall Street closes at what, 4:30 in the afternoon? Well, 5 o'clock? The closing bell at Wall Street, but it was near the closing bell at Wall Street. All right, okay. Well, announced that Wall Street rallied because the Brits voted to remain. So the point is either they didn't have accurate information, they were lying, or they broke the rules and started reporting early. Or I think that the polls had already been closed, so you were hearing preliminary reports. Because I heard preliminary reports also that it looked like the Brexit was going to lose. And then, but I think they'd throw that stuff out, and whether it's true or not, because they want to keep the public believing right up to the last minute, if they have to steal it, that it was going to go that way. Anyway, it was going to go that way, exactly. But this was before the polls had closed on MSNBC News. And I couldn't figure it out because I knew. Well, again, that's a bit of a. We'll have to find out. Maybe I can look it up on the break. We got the break starting. What time did the polls close in England? I know it for sure. Yeah. You know what time the polls closed in England for sure? What time? 10 p.m. in England. Okay. So there you have it. So would have been 3 o'clock here. So I heard it on MSNBC News before the polls closed in England. And on that note, we are going to take the top of the hour break. My friend Joe Calhoun is on the line with us, and we'll continue with him just after this.
Here's to you, my love.
welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. Joe Calhoun is on the line with us from Colorado. Joe, are you there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I checked for you on the break. London is 7 hours ahead of Denver. So if you heard this at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Denver, it was 1 o'clock it was 10 o'clock at night, I think, in London. So that would be that the polls had already closed. If you heard at 3:30 in the afternoon, it would be a half hour after the polls closed. So sometimes they have this information all queued up, but they don't release it until after the polls close, you know?
Oh, no. They do the hand count, and hand counted. So it's not like the instant – you don't get instant results, you know.
Right, but sometimes they have, you know, smaller districts where they've got it, they counted and they can, you know, extrapolate. But in any case, let's move on from this.
Well, it was big news. It was big news on MSNBC News of how Wall Street announced it before the polls had actually closed.
I'm surprised Rachel Maddow didn't announce it before the polls actually closed. I would think that she'd be enthralled for the Brits to stay in the EU. Was I wrong?
The program starts well after the polls have closed, you know. But
no, I'm saying that if she was in a position to, I'm sure she would have said it as well. I'm guessing that's what she's probably a globalist.
So basically, it was insider reports that you know it was a done deal that England was going to vote to remain with the EU,
and that just shows you the contempt that the media has for the people, right? They don't even care. They're flaunting if they're not allowed to say that, and they're saying it anyway because who's going to stop them? Who cares? They're doing the bidding of their globalist masters, no?
And they simply couldn't know it because they didn't announce the final tally, because I watched it all night, and it wasn't until they got the entire vote in at about 2 o'clock in the morning here, which was about 8 o'clock, or no, it was about 1 o'clock, so it was about 8 o'clock in the morning in England, and that's when they announced the final results. So it took a much longer time to count the vote in England because they, if you watch the TV, how they did it, they actually do paper ballots, and they have to count them by hand. And
right, and there were reports, even Nigel Farage of the KIP party was saying that I think we lost this, you know, and but, you know, he had to be saying that based on something, you know, some kind of exit polling, some kind of, I don't know. But, and even then, you know what, Joe, who knows what they're telling you as they're counting. As you pointed out, even after, you know, before the thing, everyone said, oh, it looks like they lost, and then bang, at the end, oops, they won, you know. Who knows what they're really telling you? They could be, oh my gosh, it looks like the Brexit people are going to win. Oh my gosh, it looks like the Brexit people are going to win. Hurry up and do something. Could be that. And then at the end, for whatever reason, they couldn't do something, or they tried everything they could, but it wasn't enough. I don't know.
Like I put out on Twitter, I think I put it out on Twitter or on email that Hillary was too busy to send the DNC over there to rig the vote.
Mm-hmm.
If they would have had Wasserman Schultz.
Yeah. Well, Obama told them what to do, and they apparently thumbed their nose at him too. It's going to be very interesting. Let's see. I don't think that they are going to. I don't think that they're going to allow this to stand. We'll see what happens. But you know what, George Soros, he could have let this thing slip through his people just so they could make a killing, and then to go back and switch it back to the way it was anyway.
Well, in fact, I think it's the Rothschild family made $2.1 trillion selling short.
Yeah.
So they might have.
Where did you hear that from?
This comes from, I can't even remember the link. Damn it. I wish I could, but I saw it on a link.
Well, they're usually on top of that stuff. Historically, that family usually has a good idea of which way the wind is blowing and seems to make a lot of money.
Sell short.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't see that, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was true.
And the thing is, I want to ask a question, though,
sure.
Before we talk about it, is it Thaddeus, the guy that you were talking to, or John?
Scottish John.
Scottish John?
Yeah.
Now, what was his I think I know what the angle is, but what was his angle on why Scotland and Northern Ireland voted to stay in the EU, basically? Did he?
He said it was a mystery to him, and he didn't know if the vote was clear. It doesn't make sense, but I'm not sure. You know, I don't know. I don't know what that means.
Well,
it's hard to figure out for me. But I'm going to add, Kev Baker, who's a Scottish alternative media broadcaster and whose show I've been on a few times now. I'm going to ask him to come on to our show and explain from their point of view, because they were, I was on with them about the Scottish referendum. So, I'm going to get some people from Scotland on to talk about it.
Well, the drift I got on from what I was reading is that the Scots voted to stay within the EU because they got basically the notion that the rest of Britain was going to vote to exit. And so if they needed to remain within the EU, they would have another vote. They'd say to the European Union, hey, we want to stay in the EU. We want to have another vote on independence.
Well, I think they can have another vote on independence anyway, but I think that my gut reaction was Scotland is a small country, relatively speaking. Ireland's a small country, relatively speaking. Northern Ireland's even smaller. And if they wanted their independence from England, they would probably want to just, they're used to being part of a big empire, the British Empire. They'd probably want to just switch over and get protection from the European Empire that they're trying to build to be a hedge against the former British Empire. So maybe they're used to being protected by big, strong people. So maybe they think that if they signal to the European Union that we'll be happy to stay with you and you can help keep us independent from the Brits. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that was basically the drift that they had on the TV. It was kind of a tactical vote by Northern Ireland. Exactly.
Why can't they be on their own? And, and I'm telling you this, the laundry list of gripes that I think are legitimate that the British people have and probably everybody else in Europe, it's pretty disgusting, this European Union. The European Union parliamentarians that they have apparently are just – they don't really have any say, and they get real cushy jobs with real cushy salaries, with real cushy expense accounts, and they're Europeanists, and that's their job is to just talk it up and try to make everybody feel it'll be a disaster if their countries left it. It's just it's an ugly situation, very bad. I saw a video that a friend of ours, Eric, here in New York, sent me where Yanis Varoufakis was talking with, Noam Chomsky here at the New York Public Library a few weeks ago. And Varoufakis, who was in the trenches, nose to nose with these European technocrats when he was the finance minister of Greece briefly, he said that he's talked with them about, how horrible this economic union has been, especially for Greece. And he says that the European technocrats said to him, yeah, we know it's really horrible, and that's kind of like by design because it's not a really strong political union yet, and a monetary crisis, an economic crisis with the euro, they hoped would drive a tighter European political group together. Isn't that interesting?
Well, then you're talking about, what are we talking about, democracy? Greece voted not to remove itself from the EU. The people voted not to go along with their austerity plan. Varoufakis and can't remember his name now. The Prime Minister Tsipras went to the EU, and there wasn't even a suggestion of even them putting out a word. I mean, it was like no compromise at all. I mean, just they made their case, and basically it was like the old. What even Putin said this, it was like the old Politburo of the Soviet Union that made mandatory decision without any input, without any, sort of compromise or anything. And Putin said that the EU has made more of these mandatory decisions than the Soviet Union did in its history.
Yeah, and it's, again, several people have said it. We had, Joseph P. Farrell on the show. It's the old plan that the Nazis had, apparently, for a federated Europe with a strong central Germany. It's ugly, it's stupid, it's horrible. I've been to Europe. I used to live there. I've been to Greece. I can't imagine the devastation going on in Greece now. I've seen Greece. I've lived there for a week or so, or 10 days or whatever it was. It's a lovely place with really nice people. And, so what if the trains don't run on time like they do in Germany or whatever? It's everybody's got their own character. And what a horrible, horrible situation. Let them go back to the way they were. I've been asking this question, Joe. Maybe you've seen it in my emails, and I've said it on the air and so forth. What the hell is wrong with nationhood, nationality? I don't think there's anything in and of itself. If a group of people decide they want to be a community that speaks a certain language and does things a certain way and has tolerances for this and that in a certain direction, and if that's what they want, they want to be a nation of people who are like that, what's wrong with that? As long as it respects other people, other countries. The reason nationhood has gotten a bad name is because the oligarchs who use nationhood to go and try to conquer the oligarch next door and gin their people up and say, we got to go. They got weapons of mass destruction they're going to use against us. We got to go get them before they get us. That's why nationhood has a bad name, not because of the people that live in it. And they want to destroy that. They wanted the oligarchs use nationhood when they wanted to put big super states together. And now that they've gotten that, they want to get rid of nationhood. Next thing they want to do is get rid of civilization. The war of civilization.
It's not just economic imperialism, it's cultural imperialism. In other words, everybody has to have the same social values.
It's better to market Kraft macaroni and cheese to everybody, even people who never heard of it because of their culture before. All right, Tom Kiley, INN, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Joe just after this.
This is the Logos Radio Network.
All right, good friends. Welcome back. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. We're trying to talk a little bit about the Brexit vote, the hysteria that the mainstream media, the same rat bastards that told you there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and that the Iraqis were bloodthirsty people who were chomping at the bit to use them against us, those same lying, low-life, death-dealing people, a lot of a million Iraqis died because of those lies, I would say, at least, and now we've got a really even worse situation going on throughout the entire Middle East. Those same people are trying to tell you right now that Brexit was a big mistake. It's going to be bad for England. And, of course, they can crash markets. They can punish people. And that's exactly what they're doing. Joe, isn't that the case? You were going to say something. Actually, I had to step in because we were running out of time last segment.
Well, it's like I saw this entire documentary on Press TV about the origin of the EU, and it was actually the origin of the concept of NATO and the common market. This was first started by a Bilderbergers meeting in 1954. This idea of a united Europe by a former Nazi, and the ultimate you had NATO, the common market, and then the ultimate thing to get Europe united was the EU. And look at how the EU has been used, and NATO. When you had the breakup of the Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, countries would be bribed into NATO, or the EU. That if you support us and you disqualify, your foreign policy and everything else, and the way we want it, we'll let you into NATO. Then you look, what was the big issue in Ukraine? What was the reason for the neo-Nazi Maidan to overthrow the government of Ukraine? It was because the democratic elected government of Ukraine voted against joining the EU.
This is a few things. After the Second World War, the elite in Europe and the United States, for that matter, had the pants scared off of them because the Soviet Union, which was supposed to be dispatched by their boy Hitler, far from getting dispatched, got up off its feet, off its back up on its feet, and destroyed the most technically advanced army in history until the United States finally got back into the war. So now, and by the way, Joe, you mentioned Eastern Europe, not just the Ukraine, because the Ukraine's been part of Russia, the Russian Empire, for a really long time, okay? But Poland, Hungary, Romania, right, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, these are the Eastern European countries that sit basically between Russia and Western Europe, right? That's where the Red Army ended up after the Second World War. They would have gone all the way to Paris if they didn't speed up D-Day. They were holding D-Day back, hoping lots of Germans and Russians would kill each other.
I was exactly going to say that. One of the reasons they sped up D-Day is so Stalin wouldn't reach Paris.
Right. And to the victor go the spoils, okay? You and I were raised with this propaganda. Look at how bad the Russians are. They took over these countries. They conquered them. They got a government in these countries that's favorable to them and all that stuff. Well, wait a minute. Wall Street ginned up the Nazis and were thrilled when they went against the Russians. But that was only the last particular European invasion of Russia. You had Napoleon doing it in 1812 and went all the way to Moscow. Right? You had the British doing it at least a couple of times, right? The Crimean War, the Battle of Balaclava, where the charge of the Light Brigade comes from. The British invaded. When did the Russians ever invade Britain? Never. When did the Russians ever invade France? Once, after Napoleon went all the way to Moscow. Then they invaded France to depose Napoleon. They had every right to do that, right? When did the Russians ever invade Germany? Well, after the Germans invaded them. I mean, this is crazy. So the Russian Red Army ended up, worked their way all the way across Poland, all the way across Yugoslavia, all the way across Czech. And they said, enough is enough. This is it, guys. We're sick and tired of you Europeans coming into Russia and killing us. We lost 20 million soldiers, another 20 million civilians. When you Germans came in, you know what? We are going to establish a border here. And this way, you can't just come right into Russia because we're going to control these countries. And what do? We did the same thing after World War II. We wrote the German Constitution. We controlled Germany. We controlled, and for the most part, through NATO, militarily, controlled all the other Western European countries. But we're taught that, look at the bad Russians. Look at the bad. They took the freedom of all of these people. Well, first of all, it was a hedge. It was a buffer against the Europeans who consistently invaded Russia. But what about the United States? What about Great Britain? The Japanese took our colony, the Philippines, away from us. Didn't we do the same thing the Russians did after the war? Didn't we go and take the Philippines back and dictate to them? And all the other countries that had their European colonial empires kicked out, the Dutch in Indonesia, places like that. Singapore, the Japanese kicked the British out.
Was these World War II films that these kind of Colonel Klink World War II films that we saw that the Nazis were a bunch of doofuses, and that's how one of the better films.
Well, those films were probably written by Jewish comedy writers too.
Well, yeah, and then
I'm guessing
the one film I can remember was The Longest Day, which is a really good film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But and there's only one point in where. Actually, John Wayne acknowledges he's trying to rally up the troops, and they're waiting to go in, and they're kind of tired. And he says, well, we came late into this war. And he actually said the Russians have been here for 4 years,
Facing 200 German divisions.
Yeah.
And we faced 88 in the Western Europe.
Well, I guess the point is for one of these propaganda films that we got, I thought it was an interesting point that it would be John Wayne who would make the statement that the Russians have been...
The big sissy John Wayne who didn't show up for World War II himself.
Yeah. And so I didn't realize how much the Russian effort was because we were always taught, up until through the 60s, that it's the Americans came in and just turned everything around, and won the war. And it wasn't until that series by the Thames Network in London, World at War, narrated by Sir Laurence Olivier, where I was shocked. They had 3 series on Stalingrad, Moscow, and Leningrad. And I had never realized what the Russian effort was until around 1974 when that series came out. Excellent series, World at War. You can get it on the internet and watch Red Star, Barbarossa, and Stalingrad, and you'll realize what effort the Russians did.
And there's been some good films since too. There was a German film, I think, about Stalingrad that was pretty heavy duty. But we were raised with all this propaganda about how bad the Russians were. They're taking over Eastern Europe. La la la. When they met Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt, when they're in Yalta meeting, what are they talking about? They're talking about how they're going to carve the world up. We'll let you Russians control Eastern Europe because that's where you're going to be anyway. But in exchange, you're not going to complain when we go back to retake our colonial possessions. What about the French in Indochina? They got kicked out by the Japanese. Guess what? After World War II, the British got there. The British were controlling it. The British kept the Vietnamese people down by rearming Japanese prisoners of war to keep the Vietnamese people down until the French could come back, and Laos and Cambodia. Okay? And how many millions of people were killed as a result of that? 3, 4, 6 million Vietnamese died in their war for independence? Did the Russians kill 3, 4, 6 million Poles or Hungarians?
It's also the same story after we liberated. It was either the Philippines or Burma. I can't remember. But they didn't know what to do with the Japanese army, so they made them the police.
That's right, to hold the fort down for the colonials to come back. They armed Japanese prisoners of war in Vietnam to keep the Vietnamese people and Ho Chi Minh down until the French could come back. How come we don't learn about that in our history books when they're telling us about how bad the Russians are? What they did in Eastern Europe. Tom Kiley and Joe Calhoun, INN World Report. Quick break. We'll be right back.
Here in the U.S., a man's home used to be his castle. You'd need permission to enter or a compelling reason to break in, like a search warrant. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, and I'll be back in just a moment to tell you how things have changed.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This public service announcement is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
Police are irresistible, according to the Indiana Supreme Court. It recently ruled that citizens in that state cannot resist police entry to their homes, even when the entry is illegal. The decision stems from a case where a man was stun-gunned and arrested after trying to bar the police from his apartment. Justice Stephen David explained the majority decision, claiming citizen resistance is against public policy and is incompatible with modern Fourth Amendment jurisprudence. The Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees citizens the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. Seems to me it's the Indiana Supreme Court that's incompatible with the Fourth Amendment. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht. More news and information at CatherineAlbrecht.com.
Live Free Speech Radio, LogosRadioNetwork.com.
Something wrong! Man, I smell something wrong. Something wrong! I don't think I'll be around here long.
Something's wrong with the whole damn EU. I mean, it's not wrong for oligarchs, plutocrats that run it, but for the people, forget about it. That's what we say here in Brooklyn. And a friend of mine who's been here to Brooklyn and to Manhattan, where we had INN Studios, is Joe Calhoun. Joe, you there?
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, back to what we were saying before. And it's, friends, it's a roundabout discussion. I hope it's interesting. Somebody call in, 512-646-1984. We're talking about history. You know I love history. You know I try to educate myself. You know I try to get historians on this program. You know, even Alex Jones himself, who I know does listen to the show and has called in occasionally, credited the show with that. He said that he enjoyed my historical perspective, and that's what we're sharing with you all right now. I'm not trying to be some kind of, and Joe, I'm sure you're not either, I'm not some apologist for the Soviet Union. However, what you know and what you've been taught about the Soviet Union is a pollution. It's a propagandization, and we're seeing that with so many, many other issues. We saw it about Iraq. We saw it about Libya. We saw it about Gaddafi. We saw it about the Assad family. We saw it about the Vietnamese with the lie of the Gulf of Tonkin. We saw it with the lie of the weapons of mass destruction. We're seeing about the lie of the Brexit, okay? And the lie about the Soviets with this evil empire, you know, that took over all these countries in Eastern Europe. Yes, they military, but we took over Germany after World War II. And some of those Eastern countries were sided with Germany during World War II. So some of those Eastern countries that they took over were actually enemies of us and them. But they never tell you in school, when they're teaching you how nasty the Russians were, the Soviets were, when they took over these countries, they don't tell you about how the Japanese kicked us out, and the British and the French and the Dutch and the Portuguese, you know, out of all of these colonies in Asia. And then after the war, they came back with a vengeance. The whole Indochina area, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, okay? You know, all under the control of the French. The French kicked out by the Japanese Empire. And then at the end of the war, when the Japanese had to leave, they gave those countries back to the people. And the French came back. And in some cases, the British Army actually held the countries until the French could come back. And they were murderous. The Vietnam War, the portion of the French with Dien Bien Phu ending it, and then the portion with the Americans, there are estimates that I've seen as high as 6 million Vietnamese killed. That's like what? A country of 39 million people? Joe, what's your take on it? How many people do you think were killed in the Vietnam Wars, the French one and the American one?
I think the estimate is 3 million. But what's interesting in history, Tom, is you know who was at the Treaty of Versailles to call for the independence of Vietnam in 1918 or 1919?
I'm guessing a Vietnamese gentleman who was educated in Paris.
Yes, by the name of Ho Chi Minh.
That's right.
And so what Ho Chi Minh did in his group was help kick the Japanese out of Vietnam during World War II. And guess what? The British come in, and then it's handed, you know.
Well, wait. Don't go so fast. During World War II, guess what? Ho Chi Minh was our ally to do that. And guess what? The United States Army supplied Ho Chi Minh with parachute drops of weapons. And guess what? U.S. Army Air Corps aviators were taught Vietnamese and said, if you get shot down over Indochina, say, take me to Ho Chi Minh. How about that?
Yes, and then when the French took over, the French invited Ho Chi Minh to this meeting. I think it was on, I don't know if it was, I think it was on a ship, actually, outside Hanoi or one of
Haiphong, maybe.
Haiphong, maybe. And this guy said, welcome to the Great French Alliance. And Ho Chi Minh looked at him and he says, what is that? and that's how the Vietnam War started.
Which Vietnam War?
Ho Chi Minh realized that he was being screwed.
Well, they and another thing, I think it's fairly well known in those circles, but Ho Chi Minh and the Vietnamese freedom fighters, who were trying to expel European colonial powers and then American colonial powers, were not necessarily communists. Were not necessarily Marxists.
No.
But they were the people in the world who showed them the most respect and who offered to help them. So they adopted that ideology. They were not inherently Marxists or communists, but it was only the Marxists and the communists who gave them respect and offered to help them.
And ethnically, the several years, I don't know, hundreds of years maybe, of tradition is that ethnically the Vietnamese and the Chinese hated each other. Mm-hmm. But ideologically, they aligned themselves with each other during the.
Well, I think they were aligned more with the Russians. Now, my brother Dan traveled to Vietnam a couple of years ago, and he said that the Russians are still thought of very highly over there, because of the aid and the comfort that they gave to that country while it was struggling to get its freedom from the Europeans and then the Americans.
Yes,
and I'm sorry, and I was in the Army during the Vietnam War. And I certainly don't mean to denigrate anybody's service during that time or any other time. We had a gun to our head. We were going to be drafted. We had to show up. We had to do this. We had to do that. But, that still doesn't mean that these people did not have the right to their own self-determination. And we created that country of South Vietnam out of whole cloth. It was a lie. Never such a thing as North Vietnam and South. We created a phony country. But they don't teach you that in history class either, do they?
Well, it's interesting that during that period in the 60s, I went to college. 1967 was still, believed in the domino theory that, the red, like Sherman Williams paint.
Yeah, cover the world.
In red, that it was going to be, communism was creeping up. I went to college in 1967, and guess who? We had these kind of teach-ins, mm-hmm. And two Vietnam vets show up and tell us about the Vietnam War. So I didn't become anti-war from some professor at a university. It was the veterans that came back that basically convinced me to go against the war, Vietnam vets. So I have to thank the vets, for telling me.
Oh, yeah. No, a lot of them came back here and told the truth. And some of them I know. and a lot of them are dead now prematurely because they got caught knowing the truth and coming back to a country that did not know the truth. And when they tried to explain the truth, they were ostracized.
Yes.
Because the media is owned by the people who made out hugely. General Electric has owned NBC for a long time, right? I'm not sure what share of it they own now, but they owned a commanding share of it for a very, very long time. NBC was one of the three major national networks. How is NBC supposed to report the news if there's a war going on when its parent company, GE, a big, big defense contractor, is making gobs and gobs of money from the death, the destruction, and the mayhem?
I think that's called conflict of interest.
I think that's called the devil incarnate. I think that's called the worship of mammon. I think that's called treating people like garbage, as long as you can make a profit.
There is one argument that I saw that I was just absolutely appalled because I usually, for a long time, respected a certain commentary. But there's one commentary that said, this is a disaster for Britain. They won't be able to do their military alliances with France like they did in Libya. And then the commentary goes on to talk about the Brits won't be able to defend the Rock of Gibraltar and all this other thing. And I'm going, hey, wow, what a turnaround.
Well, first of all, what's wrong with that? But it's not true because the Brits and the French, the French were in NATO. The Gaulle pulled them out, and then they conditionally went back in again. But the Brits were in NATO before the EU. Okay, and they're still in NATO, and they're going to stay in NATO. And Donald Trump, by the way, is the only guy talking about dismantling NATO now that it's not needed anymore.
Oh, but he's just doing that.
Yeah, very good. All right, we're going to take a break. Joe Calhoun on the line with us. We got one more segment. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. Talk a little bit about the Brexit, but we're going down history lane here because it's this stuff has to come back up again, and I hope you appreciate we try to learn our history the right way on this show, not the way we were taught. We'll be right back. friends, welcome back. We're coming down the home stretch. Tom Kiley, INN World Report Radio. My good friend Joe Calhoun with us. Joe, we got one more segment. I think it is fitting to talk about history because this Brexit vote is a historical vote. And, hopefully it represents a high watermark of some very, very bad people and some very, very bad ideas. As you were pointing out earlier, this, we went into history, Joe, if I may rewind it a little bit, friends, to explain to the background when the Bilderberger Group first started after World War II, and I guess it was the 50s, maybe it was the 40s still already. But when did the Bilderbergers get started?
Well, according to the program on Press TV, it was 1954.
Right, so I'm correct, the 50s. I was a year old at the time. So these were aristocrats, Nazi sympathizers, anti-union people, industrialists who wanted to make sure that the people of Europe did not demand any more concessions from their leadership because of the horrible war that they just put them through only a generation after the more horrible World War I. So they wanted to make sure they could do everything they could to keep the people of Europe in line and not to go communist, not to throw the bums out. So that's what Bilderberger was all about, how to counteract the Soviet Union that was right next door, and how to keep the European public in line. And if they had to lie to do it, so much the better. That's fine. And there's so many examples of the perfidy that happened. Are you familiar? What was it? The Congress of Cultural Freedom or something like that? Are you familiar with that group?
No, I'm familiar with the Club of Rome. I think that was part of it.
That was part of it. Absolutely. Tell everybody about the Club of Rome for a second while I get this Congress up for you.
Well, the Club of Rome, and I would have to. I'm rather rusty on my memory, but it had to do with from what I understand. My memory about the Club of Rome is rather foggy right now because I'm mixing it up with something else. And that's
the Club of Rome was a bunch of industrialists. It was a bunch of Bilderberger types got put together, I think, by David Rockefeller, some former fascists and so forth, on how to, they're the ones that started all of this sustainability hooey. That the world can only hold so many people, so many rich people and so many poor people, and there's too many poor people and got to get rid of them.
But wasn't it related to the Masonic P2 Lodge? If I remember correctly,
I'm not sure what connections. I know that all of these creeps use the Propaganda Due or P2 Lodge in Italy. It was a place where fascists would meet in secret and so forth under the cover of Masonic activities and so forth. But and that, by the way, the P2 or the Propaganda Due Lodge in Italy was supposedly renounced by the main Masonic group, but I don't know. But listen, the Congress for Cultural Freedom, was a propaganda group started in 1950 by the CIA in Western Europe to fight on an ideological and cultural basis, fight against the Soviets, There was a war for the hearts and minds of the Europeans. And the Soviets were saying, why are you letting the Americans come in and run your show now? They're not even Europeans. We're Europeans. Why don't we be friends with each other? Why don't we work it out? They're brutes. They're cultural brutes, the Americans. They're still shooting each other up. They're still killing Indians and stuff. We're Europeans too. We've got Stravinsky and we've got Dostoevsky and all of this stuff. They don't have anything over there. So
yeah, that's right. The Russians have opera.
Yeah, well, they had this, we're closer to you than the Americans. Why are you letting the Americans push you around? And so there was this battle. So to combat that, the CIA set up this group called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. Of course, they didn't let anybody know it was the CIA. They would have been laughed out of right out off the stage. They set it up in Paris, and what they did was they took all this money, CIA money, which was laundered by wealthy Americans like Junkie Fleischmann, who was the scion, the heir to the Fleischmann's gin family. And these rich people got to play cloak and dagger, and it was, fun. Let's fight the commies. So the CIA would give these people a lot of money, and then they in turn would donate it to these freedom foundations, like the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And then the Congress for Cultural Freedom, that nobody knew was run by the CIA, then went on. It was like a literary group, and they spread that money around, and they paid authors and writers and thinkers and European authors and writers and thinkers and playwrights and so to write stuff. But of course, it had to be stuff that was against the Soviets and was favorable to the United States. Otherwise, you wouldn't get paid. And everybody knew it. It was not overt, but your editors would make sure that your stuff said the right stuff or you wouldn't get called back. And it was all run by the CIA, and it was all a lie, and it was all a propaganda effort. And guess who was a big shot running that thing?
I think you said David Rockefeller?
Nope. Irving Kristol, the neocon, former Marxist, I believe, okay? Irving Kristol, whose son Bill Kristol is still a talking head, blabbering on the TV today, raised at the teat of the CIA, that guy was, and he is leading the charge against Donald Trump today.
Donald Trump. And then we have Robert Kagan, the author of PNAC.
Right.
The Project for a New American Century.
Right.
Leading the charge against Donald Trump by supporting who? Hillary.
Well, he's saying I could stand the Hillary Clinton thing. This is ridiculous, but it shows the truth. Hillary Clinton is a neocon at heart.
And Hillary Clinton has real Nazis working for her in Ukraine.
Right. And she set the neocon
thing. What is the main article that appeared about this notion that Trump is a fascist, Trump is a Nazi? Who authored that article in the Washington Post? None other than Robert Kagan.
Right. And let's try to be a little honest here. Let's try to be a little honest here, Joe. I think it's dishonest to call the neocons. And I think it is far more honest to call them Ziocons. Because I don't know of a single neocon who is not also either a Zionist or a supporter of Zionism. Which means to me that to be in that club, you have to have a Zionist mindset. All right? And that's who Kagan is. That's who Victoria Nuland is, or Noodleman, his wife. Right? And that's who all the rest of these creeps are. Irving Kristol, Bill Kristol. They're Zionists. And they get away with this stuff because they try to convince everybody that the interests of the Zionist interest and the United States interest are one and the same. And it's not. There is an overlap here and there like it is with any country, but it's not all the same. It's not one and the same. So why don't we call them what they really are, Ziocons?
And if I look on the left, the people who are apologists for Hillary Clinton, say, Hillary Clinton, hold your nose and vote for Hillary. They, too, are all basically soft on Israel and Zionism.
Oh, soft isn't the word. Soft isn't the word. They know all the talking points. They say what they got to say. But whatever. I mean, I'm not making a value judgment at this point. I'm just calling a spade a spade. And to think that you can be an ardent Zionist and, I mean, to a person, I don't think they have anybody in that neocon club who is an ardent Zionist at that. Okay, that means that you're putting the interests of Israel right up there, if not on a par, at least on a par with the United States.
Well, and then I'll give you a little breaking news that's kind of off subject a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's a big push by people, not the Bernie or bust people, but people who have caved into the idea of Hillary becoming the president. That Bernie should now, on the platform committee with his members, push Hillary not to do any more regime change.
Oh, yeah, right. Tell everybody about this. We only have about a minute before the music starts, so go ahead.
This was quite recent, is that Mr. Zogby was on there. I can't remember his first name. He was a senator. He's Arab descent. Pushed the idea of...
he wasn't a senator. He's the big pollster, Zogby.
Zogby?
Yeah, he's a pollster.
He's Arab. Is he? Are you? Well, I thought there was another Zogby that was a senator. But
go ahead.
Limited time. He was on the platform committee as a Sanders supporter, and so was Cornel West, and they pushed the idea that there would not be any aggression against the Assad government in Syria, and also a statement on Palestinians. On the Palestinians, that was turned down by the Clinton faction on the platform committee. So Hillary Clinton is not going to listen to Bernie Sanders.
No.
And Bernie Sanders...
She's not allowed to. James Zogby, born 1945, American founder and president of the Arab American Institute and brother of John Zogby. John Zogby, born 1948, American pollster, president and CEO of Zogby International, and brother to James.
Neither of them was a senator, huh?
No. I never heard that. But you're a senator, in my book anyway. Joe Calhoun, my good friends. a guy who works really hard, too hard if you ask me on some subjects, and there you have it. Okay, so we're going to call it a night. Joe, I've got a great guest coming up on Thursday night. Howard Woodhouse will be on a subject that I've talked about for years, but he's written a book about it called Selling Out. It's all about academic freedom and the corporate market that pollutes it. Okay, we'll be back on Thursday night. Have a great night. Good night, Joe.
Good night.